The origins of debt. In order to grasp this, we must return to the roots of debt. The history of debt has a past as ancient as the roots of civilization itself. In the first written documents in Mesopotamia there were neither works of literature nor philosophical thoughts, only records of how much grain or cattle each person owed. In early societies, debt was not merely an economic tool but also a sacred concept. Priests and kings supervised debts and when necessary would declare years of forgiveness. Debts had to be erased to prevent the disintegration of society. Just think about it. For a society to continue its existence, the financial system had to be restructured. The kings of that time knew a truth that today's leaders have forgotten. You cannot keep a people in debt forever. At some point the system will inevitably break. Debt and empires. Now let's move forward in time. During the Renaissance in Florence, the rise of banking families such as the Medici. Debt had now moved beyond trade in grain and livestock, transforming into forms of gold and credit. Kings and popes undertook enormous debts for wars, cathedrals and empires. But every debt inevitably carries a risk. Even Spain, overflowing with silver from the New World, declared bankruptcy 4 times in the 1500s. Because ambition had surpassed reasonable reality. Here lies the first hidden lesson. Even an empire filled with gold can fall into difficulty because of debt. The modern debt system. The real debt explosion began to be felt closely in the 20th century. After the First World War, many countries were under debts that seemed nearly impossible to repay. Germany, as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, was exposed to such a burden of debt that even economists said this country is on the verge of collapse. And they were right, their judgment proved correct. The hyperinflation of the 1920s, when Germans carried money in wheelbarrows just to buy bread, was directly related to this debt burden. That economic collapse formed the groundwork for the Second World War. Debt was not only a number, it was the trigger of chaos. Bretton Woods and the liberation of debt. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Conference built the modern financial structure. After the war, the United States controlled the majority of the world's gold reserves. The dollar was fixed to gold. 1 ounce equals $35. Other countries followed by linking their currencies to the dollar. On paper it appeared as stability, but in reality it was dependency. Every country had to believe that the United States would remain disciplined. This system worked successfully for a while. However, the desire to borrow never disappeared. In the 1960s, due to the Vietnam War and domestic policy expenses, the United States printed more dollars than it had gold. When other countries began demanding their gold back, Nixon closed the gold window in 1971. That moment was a silent revolution. Debt now knew no boundaries. There was no gold left, only trust. The age of infinite debt. Economies began to be managed by adjusting interest rates. When growth slowed, interest rates were lowered and more borrowing followed. In times of crisis, solutions were again found through new debt. Every rescue carried beneath it a debt greater than the one before. In the 1980s, during the Reagan and Thatcher eras, public debts exploded. Developing countries were crushed under this burden. The result, the Latin American debt crisis. The rule was clear. Create wealth through debt, then drown in that same debt. 2008 and after. The crisis of 2008 was not merely a housing problem. It was the collapse of a structure built by stacking debt upon debt. Loans were transformed into securities sold to investors, insured with derivatives and expanded with 30x leverage. When a single failure occurred, the entire system collapsed. Banks went bankrupt, pension funds vanished, millions of people lost their jobs. Yet the strange thing is this. Some of those who caused the system to collapse were rescued. Who paid the price? The people. Today, an unbelievable mountain. In the last 20 years, global debt has tripled. As of 2023, it exceeded $300 trillion. This equals 4 times the size of the world economy. The U.S. debt will surpass $34 trillion in 2024. The interest payments alone equal the defense budget. Meaning the superpower now has to take on new debt just to pay interest on its old debt. In Europe, Italy and Greece still carry debts exceeding 100%. China's hidden liabilities are far above official figures. Everywhere a similar picture appears, debt has settled into the core of the system. Why does no one notice? Because debt has become invisible. There is a deficit in the state budget, but no one comes to your door saying, "Give me money." The bank sells bonds and borrows in your name. You use a credit card, you're not spending money, you're borrowing. When companies announce record profits, most of those profits come from share buybacks inflated with borrowed money. The system progresses using leverage. But leverage is like gravity. You feel light as you rise, but when you fall it hits hard. Real effects. Debt always creates a result. It negatively affects behavior. It creates bubbles. It shifts wealth. And most importantly, it enslaves future generations. Every debt is a bet placed on future labor. And when the numbers become too large, repayment becomes impossible. Throughout history, every debt has ended in three ways. It is either paid faithfully, or melted away through inflation and escaped secretly, or defaulted on entirely. No empire has ever escaped this outcome. Where are we heading now? Today the path is clear: inflation. Governments must devalue money to lighten their debt burden. They appear as if they are raising interest rates, but their real aim is to increase inflation. Because in this way they shrink their debts. Who pays the bill? You. Your salary, your savings, your purchasing power slowly melt away. This is one of the oldest tricks in history, yet people still believe it. Because they think the numbers are abstract. Because the system has taught them that debt is someone else's problem. In conclusion, debt is not merely an economic matter, it is a matter of power. Who lends, who borrows, who is rescued? The system is structured so that when things go bad, the powerful are protected, while the weak pay the price. Banks are supported. Corporations are restructured. Politicians can retire. But people lose their homes, their jobs, their hopes. That is why understanding debt is not just economic knowledge. It must be seen as knowledge for survival. If you cannot see the system, you live inside it without realizing your chains. Therefore, understand that debt is not neutral. Do not forget history, no system has ever found an escape from debt. And protect yourself, have knowledge, perspective and assets with real value. Because the system will continue repeating the same mistakes. History keeps reliving the same cycles. Debt rises, leaders deny, crisis erupts, society restarts. Your choice is this. Will you reach this cycle blind or conscious? If this gave you a new perspective, follow. History carries every answer within itself. And I will show you where you need to look.